Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely, and with me, as usual, is my co-host and founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, who is also host of RT's flagship show, Crosstalk. And today we're doing our routine, as it has now become for Saturdays, thumbs up or thumbs down, and where we point out the good and the bad things of the past week. All right, Peter, what's any thumbs ups or thumbs downs this week?
I have one story with thumbs up and thumbs down simultaneously. And of course, it's the Bob Woodward book in which he interviewed Donald Trump repeatedly. That's an unforced error on the side of Trump. It's a mystery to me. Bob Woodward is not an honest messenger when it comes to the political environment right now. So Trump walked into a trap of his own making. I wouldn't talk to Bob Woodward. Why would you? I mean, his behavior during the entire Trump administration has been abysmal. And this adds insult to injury, because I actually looked up to someone I looked up to him actually because of Watergate, because I lived through it and I remembered. I was a small child and I idolized journalists like that. I don't idolize people like him today at all. Okay, so thumbs down for Trump and thumbs up for the media swamp. They finally got something on him. Okay, because I'm unconvinced it will be determinative in this election, but unforced errors is something you have to avoid. I mean, at this late stage in the game. So, Mr. Trump, inexplicable behavior from you.
Well, one thing I would say, though, about his interviews with Woodward is that Trump is a BS artist. There's no particular reason to believe anything Trump tells Woodward or anyone else. So the fact that he says something to Woodward in February, oh yeah, this is a really serious business, and then he says something different in March, what does that tell us? It just tells us that Trump just says whatever he feels like saying. He's always done that. So there's no particular reason to hold that, on February the 7th, Trump was really revealing something. You know, he may have just been sucking up to Woodward to show that he was a very serious president and he was taking it all very seriously. Then in March, he changed his mind and was not taking it seriously. So I don't think it will do Trump that much damage, because people are just used to just Trump talking off the top of his hat anytime he wants. So now,
but I would just give an ad. I think you're absolutely right. Okay, I mean, and I've tried to explain to many people is that I've gotten used to the way he talks and the way he behaves, and I know what to take seriously and what not to take seriously, and I think actually most people do. Okay, however, the only caveat I would add to all of this is that I am convinced that this election is going to be about Trump's reaction to the coronavirus and the economic turn-in. I think that's going to be the determinative issue here. I may be wrong, but if you look at the demographics, particularly elderly people that were very much on his side in 2016 have basically left him. And I think that's very important. At the end of the day, you have to count up the votes and the demographics and the battleground states and the Electoral College. And it's something like this that just, if you maybe were just like, I might give him another, because the alternative is just horrific. But when it comes down to this issue here, I think that is determinative. But I take on board what you had to say. I mean, he's a bullshit artist, okay, and he's made a career out of it, okay. So, but there are certain nexus points where I think that it can make people think twice when they normally wouldn't when it comes to this.
It could well be, because it's striking that the polls are not moving. For all the talk that Trump is closing the gap in the polls, it isn't really happening. From what I can see, the polls are remaining fairly static, which may not be good news for Trump. And you may be right. It may be the virus that is actually. People are now locked in whichever position they take on the virus, and that could be the reason why the polls. Because I thought the law and order issue would work for Trump. Doesn't seem to be. All those states like Wisconsin and Minnesota, who have been badly hit, by riots. Again, Biden seems to have a decisive lead there. So that could change. I'm not saying that that's right. It hasn't changed yet.
We've touched on it before, and I think the biggest problem for Trump in his campaign. I mean, first of all, a lot of people that work for him are morons. Okay, when they get on cable TV, they acquit themselves so badly. Okay, I mean, so he has an HR problem, I think that what it gets down to for a lot of people is did Trump take his governance seriously? Because I have to have doubt about that. He's a great campaigner when he's allowed to campaign, but the circumstances have not really allowed him to do that. As a governing sitting president, no, because he never really mastered or had someone working for him that had mastered the legislative process, and that's a huge weakness for him. And it's his fault. Okay, I mean, what you needed to do is to bring in someone that knew the Senate inside out and backwards, in the House, and really know how to work back channels, because that's how things are done in Washington. But when you have this array of people around him, which I don't hold in very high esteem. Right. So this is an issue here, and this is where his opponents got him. Because when he can't campaign, he doesn't convey his message very well. He's an orator that has an amazing instinct to understand his crowd, the people that he's interacting with. And he hasn't been able to do that. He hasn't been able to make that connection. And second of all, that's really important that you and I have talked about, he's never really been able to capture a message against Biden. It remarkably, okay. I mean, first of all, his lack of mental finesse. I mean, you can only go so far with that, and then it looks cruel, and even he knows that, okay. But he's, a crooked Hillary that just landed the blow. It landed the blow because it was true. How does he land the blow?
No, I think that's right, and I think that why 2016 was easier for him than 2020. Is Hillary Clinton's deep unpopularity. It was easy to hit her because she really was disliked. Biden is not disliked. I mean, even if people look upon him as badly aging and badly, physically and mentally deteriorating, people still quite like him, and therefore it's a little harder. You really got to get Biden, I think, where we talked about before, where he's vulnerable, which is that he's a sleazebag. He's a kind of typical Washington sleazebag. He's got his detail, and his family is getting fat off him, and he doesn't care about anyone other than himself and his friends and how to get rich. I mean, all the rest, that he's a communist or a fascist or whatever, that's just idiotic. All right. So now
I just think, it's even the law and order thing, which you and I have discussed earlier. I mean, in a very weird way, he can go back to his crime bill. I mean, he's at the center of the crime bill. Okay, how can you say he was soft on crime? I mean, in my opinion, he was too hard on it. Okay. And so, I mean, Trump just hasn't been able to define Biden, and that is that is also determinant, I think, in this election, because it's so easy to define Donald Trump. If you love him or hate him, it's easy to define. With Joe, you're right. I mean, no one's talking about Burisma. No one's talking about Hunter. I mean, all of this corruption that surrounds him and other elements of his family that have been tied to corruption. I mean, it's Peter Schweizer's book. I mean, he talks about this with the Clintons, and he's also has quite a bit of knowledge about the Bidens as well. So it's a mystery to me. It's getting too late in the game to land a final blow, and that's why I think that it's up for grabs.
So just to continue. So my thumbs up. I mean, once it was a bizarre tweet by Paul Krugman, a New York Times columnist, in which he obviously was having a go at Trump, and contrasting, obviously, Trump unfavorably with George W. Bush and 9/11. So he came up with this bizarre 6-tweet sequence in which he says in one tweet, overall, Americans took 9/11 pretty calmly. Notably, there wasn't a mass outbreak of anti-Muslim sentiment and violence, which could all too easily have happened. And while George W. Bush was a terrible president, to his credit, he tried to calm prejudice. And then he says that there's another one saying, daily behavior wasn't drastically affected. True, for a while, people were afraid to fly. My wife and I took a lovely trip to the US Virgin Islands a couple of months later because airfares and hotel rooms were so cheap. But life returned to normal fairly fast. And then his final tweet, almost 2 decades on, it's now clear that the real threat to America comes not from foreign terrorists, but from homegrown white supremacists. But you know what? That was true even in 2001. I mean, there's so much wrong here in this bizarre tweet. You know, the whole idea that he brings up his silly little vacation with his wife 2 months after 9/11, and he doesn't think it's inappropriate. But if you think of, you know, what happened after 9/11, I mean, America launched this horrific global war on terror with its rendition, an extraordinary rendition, the massive, horrific invasions on Afghanistan and Iraq, the surveillance that took place on Americans after that, Guantanamo Bay. I mean, you know, the list just goes on and on. And here he was smugly saying, oh, it's pretty good. Everything was fine.
And add on the defense spending, the lack of investment in infrastructure, the crushing of the middle class, which goes across administrations here. No, but this is an individual. I mean, it's, you know, because I heard this a few months ago and I just can't let it go. He's just one of these guys that drinks wine in the shower. You know, I mean, pandemic, economic, vast economic recession. He's still drinking wine in the shower. I mean, he has no idea how people are living. He has no idea how many Muslim countries have suffered from this war on terror. It was a war that terrorized, that's for sure. But this shows the disconnect of the political class here. They just have no idea how the rest of the people are feeling. You know, does he know how many people could be thrown out on the street in the next few months because, okay, maybe there's an executive order, a moratorium on throwing people out, but that is just forbearance. People are going to have to pay, okay? And then we have a K recovery. The richer got richer and the poor got poor. So here's a guy that is so disconnected, okay? If he's the type of guy that argues about rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. That's the kind of guy he is.
I agree completely. Any more thumbs up and thumbs down?
Thumbs down for the peace process in the Middle East. I mean, there's a diplomatic breakthrough with Israel and Bahrain. I mean, Bahrain's an occupied country by the Saudis. I mean, come on. Right. I mean, did anybody mention that? Did anybody mention it here? I mean, like I said before, and I'll keep it short, this is just another way to keep the United States in that strategic backwater called the Middle East, okay? I mean, you know, we're invested in our assets and our allies and all of that. These are not our friends. None of them are a friend of America. America is the place where they fleece, okay? That's what they do. They're fleecing it, okay? And again, no investment in the middle class, no investment in the infrastructure of the country. The average people, they're left to fend for themselves. So watching this diplomatic breakdown, these two countries weren't at war. I mean, you said that the last time we talked.
All right, then, you know, in the limited time available, then I'll just mention two thumbs downs. Debbie Wasserman Schultz wrote an article denouncing Donald Trump for selling F-35 fighters to the United Arab Emirates, which threatens Israel's qualitative edge. And that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is actually a surrogate for Biden. And then there is the telephone erasures that we've found out about, that all of the Mueller team, they all erased their telephones. Imagine that. They thought that all of them are on government salary. They all erased their telephones. All right, so that's a thumbs up and thumbs down. If you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon.